Alrighty. So, slideshow. Here we go. Alright, so we are now doing the third video of review, which is evolution. This is a shorter video, so we should be able to get through it pretty quick. So, here are our expectations for evolution, what you should be able to master before you take the EOC. We're going to go over some of the big main ones. First things first, this thing called allele frequency. Make sure you're writing these notes in the box on your handout. All this means is that the good genes are passed on, so the population will increase. The bad genes, or the genes that don't help, will die out. So for example, if you're good at camouflaging, that is a good gene. You're more likely to live longer, so your population will increase. If an organism is not good at camouflaging, it's probably going to get eaten, and the bad genes will die out because they won't live long enough to have babies. Some exceptions. If this gene doesn't affect you until after you have a baby, the gene is going to stay in the population. Or carriers of the gene can still pass it on. So even if they don't have it, they might be a carrier of it and can pass on the gene to their offspring. This allele frequency does not have to do with dominant or recessive. A gene can never just decide that it wants to be dominant and not recessive anymore. This is more so just about how the genes fit into the environment. So for example, down here, we see frequency of two forms of butterfly with dark eye spots and light eye spots at two different time periods. So over time, the light eye spots are decreasing in population, and the dark eye spots are increasing in population. So what that might mean is that the light butterflies are not blending into the environment as well anymore. So something's eating them and decreasing their population. All right, so for example, a genetic disorder in an animal population is fatal. What fatal means is deadly. But it does not disappear from the population, even after many generations. Which statement is a possible explanation for the continued existence of the disorder? So A, the disorder affects only a small number of people. That wouldn't explain why it stays in the population. B, the disorder resulted from a random gene mutation. C, the effects of the disorder are insignificant or do not matter until well after sexual maturity. Sexual maturity means you can have babies. If you have babies, you pass on your genes. So the reason this stays in the population is because people who have this gene are able to have babies before it kills them. So they pass on the gene. All right, all children born with a certain lethal genetic disease die within a few years of birth. So if they're dying within a few years of birth, they're not having babies. They're not passing it on. Nonetheless, the disease continues to occur in the human population. What is the explanation of this? How is it still showing up in the population if these children are dying a few years after they're born? So A, the mutation for the disease continually recurs in human populations. Okay, we already know that, but this doesn't explain why. B, people with the allele for the disease mate randomly with people without the allele. So people who have the disease are not mating. We already learned that they're dying within a few years of birth. So they're not going to have babies. That's weird. C, the disease is caused by a dominant gene. Therefore, if one chromosome has it, the person will have the disease. That is not true. Or D, parents can be carriers of the disease without being affected by it. Therefore, they can pass it on and it stays in the population. Absolutely. Carriers can pass something on without actually affecting the people. All right, our next thing is evolution evidence. Also, you have under allele frequency 2 questions to do on your own. But let's talk about evolution evidence. So the best evolution evidence is DNA. Similar DNA between organisms. So for example, we share 96% of our DNA with monkeys, with chimpanzees. The similar DNA means they have a similar common ancestor. Similar DNA also means similar proteins. This is the best form of evidence. So the base pairs of our DNA are the same. That means there's a common ancestor. The other one is embryology. So if you remember from class, we looked at the development of the different embryos, or like over here, development of the different embryos. Organisms develop organs in similar orders. So you can't really see organs here yet, but you can see the same number of cells after each division. So what this means, though, is that all organisms develop the head first, maybe the spine. If they look similar in embryo form, they have a common ancestor. Another one is fossils, or those bones from the ground. What those show us is how a species progresses over time, so the transitional forms. We also know that older fossils are on the bottom, newer fossils are on the top. So fossils show us those transitional forms of species, which is like species who we can map out and are evolving over time. We also can use anatomy to compare by looking at things called homologous structures. Right up in here, we have 3 different organisms, but they all have similar structures. That means they are homologous. Homo means same, so they have the same ancestor. We also have analogous. Analogous is different ancestors. That means that they have different structures. And we have these things called vestigial organs, which are organs that are not used because species evolve, they don't need them anymore. So, which fossil provides the most compelling evidence of the theory of evolution? A fossil of a shelled marine organism unlike any alive today. B, a fossil of an ancient tree with a flower and seed parts very similar to those trees today. C, a fossil of a dinosaur nest and an adult showing evidence of parental care. Or D, a fossil of an animal with some characteristics of reptiles and some characteristics of birds. The only one that shows a transitional species is D. If there's an animal that has some characteristics that look like a reptile and some that look like a bird, that's your clue that is a transitional species. All right, which observation could best be used to indicate an evolutionary relationship between 2 species? So what observation is the best evidence? A, they have similar base sequences. Base sequences is referring to DNA. DNA, remember we have A, T, G, and C. If species have similar DNA, that is the best evidence that they are related. We don't even have to look at the rest. Kingdoms. So you have this chart on your note packet. So some key things to note here is that there's all these different kingdom names. More than likely you're going to be given a chart on the EOC. But let's go through some of these. So remembering back, uni means one, multi means many. These first 3 kingdoms are all unicellular. They only have 1 cell. The last 3, plants, animals, and fungi, are multicellular. They have many cells. We also remember prokaryotes and eukaryotes. The first 2 are prokaryotes, meaning they do not have a nucleus. The last ones are all eukaryotes. We also have heterotroph or autotroph. Hetero means you do not make your own food. You have to eat something. Auto, think automatic, they make their own food. So we have the first 3 are both heterotroph and autotroph. So they can either make their own food or they can eat something. Fungi and animals are hetero. We can't make our own food. We have to eat something. Plants are the only autotrophs. They are the only ones that 100% make their own food. Sessile means does not move. I would write this down as a vocab word somewhere in your packet. And motile means moves. The first 3 can do both. They can either chill and not move, be sessile, or they can move and be motile. The next 2 do not move. Fungi, think of mushrooms. Mushrooms are a type of fungus. And plants, think of all the plants. They can't move. They are sessile. Animals definitely move. Okay, so the diagram labels a few parts of a cell. What best identifies